According to Stack Overflow survey, for the last 8 years, JavaScript is the most commonly used language. And in this video, we will learn JavaScript. Hi, I'm Arsalan. I'm a GitHub campus expert and a Gold Microsoft ambassador. I make videos on technical topics like web technologies. So if you want to see more such videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel. So to execute our JavaScript code, what we need to do is that we need to open our web browser and we need to open our developer tools, and we can do that by right click and go to the inspect, or we can just tap on F12 and that will open the developer tools for us. Now there are two ways to execute our JavaScript code in the developer tools. One is to use the console tab and the other is to use the sources tab. Now we will go with the sources tab. And the reason for that is in the console tab, when you write some code, execute that, and then you close your tab or close your browser, you lost all the data, you lost all the code. Whereas in case of sources tab, we make some snippets, and once we make a snippet, we do not lose it unless we delete it by ourselves. So that is why to save our code, to save our content permanently, we need to use the snippets instead of console tab. So when you open your developer tools and you go to the sources tab, initially you will see something like this, and you will see something like this. So what you need to do to open your snippets, you just need to click on this these icons, these double arrow icons. I will zoom the page a little bit. So you just need to click on this and choose the snippets. So in the snippets, you can create your own snippet. So let's go with the snippet and create one. So I will name this console. Now the very first thing we are going to do in our code in the JavaScript is that we will see how we can console something on the screen. So to console something on the screen, if you have used Java or C++, especially in C++, you can do something like cout. And in case of Java, you can do system.out.print. So in case of JavaScript, what you can do to print something, you can type console.log double quotes and the brackets and then the double quotes, and then you can type your string. And once you do that, you can just tap on Ctrl S to save that, and then you can do Ctrl Enter, and that will execute your code in the console tab. So you can see here a hello world. Now one thing, if you have noticed, that I did not add any semicolon after the bracket, and the reason for that is if you do not add the semicolon, you can still execute the code. But a good practice is that you include the semicolon in your code. So we will go with the semicolon. If you do not add it, it will still be working fine. But there are some cases where it does not work as expected. So I would suggest you to always put a semicolon at the end of your code. But just to let you know that if you even do not add any semicolon, your code will still work fine. So in the JavaScript, you can go without any semicolon. And another thing is that instead of these double quotes, you can also go with the single quotes, and it will also work fine. Now if I save this and press Ctrl Enter, it will again print it for me, which is hello world. Now this is how you can console anything on the screen. Now let's move on to variables. And in the JavaScript, there are two types of variables. So for the variables, let me make a new script and call it variables. Now there are two types of variables in the JavaScript. The first one is primitive types and the other one is non-primitive types. In the primitive types, you have strings, you have numbers or integers or floating numbers or decimal, and then you have booleans. Whereas in non-primitive types, you have things like arrays, objects, functions, and also dates. Now we will be talking about the primitive types. Of course, we will cover the non-primitive types as well, but that will be later in this video. So primitive types. So to declare any primitive type or any non-primitive type, if you have worked with C++ or Java or something like that, or C Sharp, if you want to write any string, if you want to declare any string or integer, you may have noticed that you need to type some specific keyword for every single variable, every single type. Like for integer, you need to use int, for string, you need to use string, and for boolean, you need to use bool, something like that. But in case of JavaScript, you do not need to do that. So JavaScript is a loosely typed language, which means that you do not need to specify the exact type of the variable. So to declare a variable in JavaScript, all you need to do is that you just need to type let, L-E-T, and then the variable name. So for example, if I want to have a string, so let name equals to, and it has a value of $def. So this is how you can define a string, how you can define and declare a string in JavaScript. And if you want to console this on your browser, in your browser, so you can also do that by again using this console log statement and then name inside the brackets. And notice that I did not add any double quotes inside the brackets. So if for example, if I add any brackets, then this will just console the name for me instead of this def. So if I now do control enter, it says name. And if I remove the double quotes and save that, control enter, now it says def. Now one other quick thing that I will add here is that I will add console.clear. So what does this function do is that every time I execute my code, it will remove anything that is on my console and clear it for me. So now for example, if I again execute the code, it cleared every single thing that was on the screen, and then I can see def. Now you may have noticed this undefined, so do not worry about that. This is something that has to do with the browser, so you do not need to worry about that. Talking about the numbers, integers or floating or decimal, we can also declare and define that with the same keyword, which is let, and here let num equals to, for example, 32. For decimals, we can do something like pi equals to 3.14. And then for the booleans, we can also do is auth, meaning is authenticated equals to false. Now this is how you can declare a string, how you can declare an integer, how you can declare a decimal number, and how you can declare a boolean. Now one thing to keep in mind is that the decimal numbers or the floating numbers or integers, all of them are treated as just numbers in JavaScript. Now we have declared our strings, our numbers, our decimals, and our booleans. Now let's also console these other variables on the screen. So I will just copy this and paste it multiple times and just change the values pi, and this will be is auth. Now control S to save that and control enter to print that on the screen. So you can see here I have def and then 32 and then 3.14 and then false. Now let's say I have something like first name which is just Khatak, and then I have second name or maybe last name which is dev, and then I have another string which is full name. And what I want to do is that I want to concat first name and this last name and make it a full name and assign that to full name. So what I can do is that first name plus last name and save that. And now instead of name, I do console log full name. Now save that and control enter. And now you can see here again, this is dev. Now if you want any spacing in between, you can do this here. Just add any space here, that will work fine. Another way to do that is that add a third string here and have the space here directly instead of declaring any one special variable for this. So if I save that and execute the code, it again gives me the space. So that is how you can concat two strings. Now this also works for numbers. So for example, if I do numpy equals to num plus pi and save that and copy this, now if I save that and control enter, now you can see it gives me 35.14. So that is how you can add strings, and that is how you can add numbers and floating numbers and decimals, etc. Now this is how you can work with the variables. Now the next thing that we are going to cover is the control statements. So let me first make a snippet for that, and then let's see what exactly is control statements. So control statements are the statements that is executed on some specific condition. One example of this is that you want to show the home page to the user if he has logged in. If not, you want to show him the login page. So now this is you can use a control statement here. So the control statements are if statement and switch statement. So we have control statements, and they are if else and switch. So now let's make a home page. For now, just for simplicity, I will just make two strings and name that as a home page and in login page. So this is a home page, and then login page equals to this is a login page. Now I also make a boolean that is authenticated equals to false. Now this is authenticated is a boolean which is false, and we have these two strings, home page and login page. Now we can use this if statement to check if the user is true or false, and based on that we can do some specific code execution. So for example, just consider this for now, that this home page is actually the home page that you want to show, and this login page is actually an actual login page. Now if is authenticated is equals to true, which means that the user has been logged in. So in that case we can show him the home page. If not, else. So we can just have two conditions. One will be if this is true. If that is not true, then we just have one other condition left, that is authenticated is false. So we can just use else. So else console.log, and this will be login page. Now save this and control enter. I actually also have to use console.clear and control enter, and now you can see this is a login page, and the reason for that is authenticated is false. So that is why it comes to this code and it gives us this is a login page. Now for example, if I switch that to true and then execute it again, you can see this is a home page. So control statements, one of the control statement is if else, where you can decide if something is true, then execute some specific code. If not, then execute some specific code. So we just talk about two scenarios. So if is authenticated is true, so then we can execute this. If not, then we will have just one other case. So there might be some other cases. For example, we have to calculate something like a GPA for a student, where we have like some specific cases. For example, he will have A grade if his marks are between 90 to 100, and then he will have B grade if his marks is between 80 to 90, and then C grade if his marks is about less than 80. So we have like here we have these three cases. So when we have just two cases, we can just use if and then else. But in some case scenarios, we have something like this, where we have like 3 or 4 or 5 or multiple cases. So in that case, we can use one other keyword, that is else if. So for example, I have student marks, which is, for example, let's go with the 90, and then if student marks is greater than or equal to 90, so this is a sign if you're not sure this is greater than or equal to. So if it is 90 or if it is more than 90, here you can do something like it is A grade. And then we have else if this is not true, then another condition can be is greater than equals to 90 or 80. And here we can do something like this, B grade, and then we have else if this will be actually just else, and then we can do C grade. Now if I execute this, you can see here it says A grade, and then if I do 80, for example 85, execute this, it says B, and if I change that to 55, it says C. Now we have some issues here. So for example, if I do something like 105, and which is more than the maximum limit, which is 100, and I execute the code, it still gives me A grade. So to fix this issue, we have something called operators. So we have and or operators. So if you have studied logical gates, you may have some knowledge about that. So we have two kinds of operators. One is or and the other one is and. So the way we can denote that is with these symbols. Now what does this or means? That we can have multiple conditions if the if statements using this and or operation. Now here we have this condition that if it is the marks are between 90 to 100, so one condition is greater than equals to 90 and other condition is less than equals to 100, and in between two we need to have AND operator, because both of these needs to be true. So if I now save that and execute this code, now you can see it gives me it is B, and the reason for that is this condition goes false. So if this goes false, it will automatically comes to this, and which says that student marks is greater than 80. So these marks are obviously greater than 80, so that is why it says that it is a B grade. So now let's also fix that too. So student marks is less than equals to 89, and also add something AND operator here. Now if I do this, if I execute the code, it will say it is C grade, and you can see it here. Now it says it is C grade. Now depending on how you are handling the situation, you can obviously have something here. If student marks are greater than 100, then you can have something like invalid marks or something like that. But just to give you an idea, you can have like these AND operators in the code, and that will check if both of the conditions are true. You can also have something like this OR operator, and the difference between AND and OR operator is that in case of AND operator, it checks that if this condition is true, then move on to the next condition, and if that is true, then execute this code. If only one of the condition goes false, then it just ignore the code and go to the next step, go to the next if statement. Whereas in case of OR, we check that the code just wants any one of the condition to be true. So if this goes false but this is true, then this code will be executed. I can give you an example of that as well. So let's say we have 85 and I console that, so it says that it's A grade, and the reason for that is 85 is obviously less than 90, so it is false, but 85 is also less than 100, so this condition goes true. That is why we are having A grade. Now let's fix that. So that is how you can use these conditional operators. in your code, which are all are AND. Now this is how you can work with if and else and else if statements. Now another conditional control statement is switch. These are also card conditional statements. So for switch you have some syntax like this, switch, and then you have some cases here. Now in switch you cannot use these greater than or less than. The way how this works is that you have to use the student marks and have it here inside the brackets, and then here we can define the cases. So for example, if the user have 90 marks, in that case you can have a colon and then console.log marks are 80, 90, and then you need to use the keyword break, because I will come to this break in a while. And then you can have something like this, console.log marks are 80. And we also have a default here, and this default works just like the else, this else. So if all the conditions are falses, if other cases does not match, then it moves to this default. And here no matched marks. Now save this, and if I execute the code, it says that no matched marks. So again, one of the things that I just said, that you cannot have greater than or equals to. You can have just have the equals to check in the switch statement. So it says that case 90, which means that student marks equals to 90. So if that is true, you will have this code executed. If it is equals to 80, you will have this code executed. I actually also need to have this break. And if not, if all of them are false, then it goes to the else statement, which is the default. Now let's talk about the break statement. So the break statement actually means that if, for example, the marks are 90 and this case is true and it executes the code, then do not check the other cases like the case 80 and default. So if you do not have the break statement, it will check for if the case is 90, it will execute this code, and then it will also check for this code as well. Let me show you that practically. So for example, I have 90 here, and then I can also do something like this, marks are 90 again, just to show you, and then execute the code. Now you can see here I have this marks are 90, but if I comment this code, break, and execute the code again, it says that marks are 90 and marks are 90 again. So we need to have this break statement if you do not want to check the code again. And another thing is that, for example, if you have some specific marks, like just imagine a scenario that you have like 80 and 90 are the marks that you call bonus marks. So you want to have something like, if the marks are 90, you can call them bonus marks, and if the marks are 80, you can also call them bonus marks. And you have the break statement here, and now execute the code. It says bonus marks, and it will also be true for 80 as well, and it again says bonus marks. Now imagine if you have 80, 90, 100, 70, 60, 50, so you will have to like repeat your code again and again. So one way to get rid of that is that you can remove this 80 case and also take this case 80, cut it from here and paste it here. And you can also have case 70, you can also have case 60, and you can also have case 100. So this is just like using if statement with all operators, like if marks equals to 100, or marks equals to 90, or marks equals to 80, or marks equals to 70, or marks equals to 60, and so on. And then if I save it, and let me change that to 60, execute the code, it says that bonus marks. If I do it 66, execute the code, no matched marks. So that is how you can have all condition in your switch statement. So the next thing that we are going to look at is loops in JavaScript. So let me quickly make a file for that, a snippet for that. And so basically, if you do not know about what exactly are loops, so loops is something that helps you to execute your code again and again until a specific condition goes false. So for example, your task is to print number from 1 to 100 or from 1 to 1000. So one way of doing that is that you do something like console log 1 and then copy this and then change it here from 2, 3, 4 and goes on until you reach 1000. You cannot go for like from 1 to 1000 using console.log statement. So an easy way to do that, an easy way to repeat your task, an easy way to repeat your code is to use loops. So there are multiple types of loops that you can use, and they are for loop, while loop, and do while loop. So if we have to print numbers from 1 to 100, we can just use these loops. So let's start with the for loop. So this for loop is actually divided into three parts. The first one is declaration, the other one is condition, and the third one is change, which can be either incremental or decremental. You can have numbers like +1 each time, or you can have -1 each time, or you can have multiply by 2 or divide by 2. It is up to you. So it is actually divided into three parts. The first part is declaration. So let's have something like I equals to 0, and then the second one is condition. So this condition, so this code will execute it, whatever we have in the body here, it will be executed unless we have this condition false. So the condition is that we have to execute it unless we reach to 100. So the condition is 100, I is less than equals to 100. And then increment, so the change is that we want this to be +1 every single time. So I plus plus means that I plus equals to 1 or I equals to I plus 1. So a shorthand for that is that you can just use I plus plus. Now here you can do console.log I and save that, and let's also switch that from 0 to 1. Now if I execute the code, you can see it here. I have the number starting from 1 all the way up to 100. So that is how you can use the loop. So again, loops are to execute your code again and again until some specific condition goes false. Now that is how you can execute the for loop. Now for a while loop, let us comment this. The shorthand for commenting some code is that you can just highlight the code and press Ctrl and the /, and that will comment out the code for you. Now in the while loop, we have just one part in the while loop, and that is the condition. You do not have any declaration here or any change here. So if you want to achieve that exact same algorithm that we had in this for loop, we need to define this I equals to 1 outside of the while loop. So let I equals to 1, and then inside the while loop we need to have this I plus plus here. So I plus plus here, and this will be at the end of the termination of the while loop. Now here you can have console log I, so this is the body, and then the condition was I is less than equals to 100. So now let's go with I is less than equals to 50, and now if I execute the code, it goes from 1 to 50. Now you can also have something else here as well. For example, you can have some static content here as well. So now this will print _dev 50 times for me. Now you can see here it says that 50, which means that this _dev was executed 50 times. But since this was the same string, same content that was executed 50 times, so that is why the browser just add 50 here. So meaning that this was executed 50 times. So you can have anything here. Now for example, I have _dev, and then in the next line I want to have my I, and then if I execute this, now you can see here the first line is _dev, and then 1 _dev 2 _dev 3, And you can also have something like this. So I'm just showing you the multiple variation. So you can have any code that you want to execute inside a loop. And then moving on to the do while. So in the do while, you have the syntax something like this, and you have the condition here. Now in the do while, you can have the exact same thing again. I will just copy the code from here, and I will comment this code and have I++ here. Now if I execute the code, it again gives me this attack 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 up to 50. Now let's talk about the non-primitive types, which I also discussed in when we were talking about the primitive types. So arrays, objects, function, and date. So let's starting with the arrays. Let's make a snippet for that. So an array is defined in JavaScript by something like this. So this is a simple syntax for an array declaration and definition. So this means that we have an array with the name ARR, and that is equal to 1 2 3 4. Now you can also have an array of names, for example. And you can also have an array for the booleans as well. True, false, true. And you can also have a mixture of these as well. 1 high, true, by, false. And this is 3. So this is how you can declare and define an array, is that you can have a pure integer based array, you can have string based array, you can have boolean based array, and even you can have a mixture of these as well. So that is how you can declare and define arrays. Now the way of executing them is simply you just need to do console.log and pass the name of an array. So let's go with the array of strings, save that, and now you can see it here. It says that hi hello world. Also let me add console.clear here. Now let's also console the rest of the arrays as well. Now if I save that and execute that, you can see it here. We have 1 2 3 4 hi hello world, true false true, 1 hi true, 2 by false. So that is how you can simply console log your arrays. Now the next thing is that, for example, you want to execute, or for example you want to get a specific value from an array. For example, you want to check what is in the first index of this mixed array. Now to do that, for example, let's first go with consoling that by printing that. So to print the first index of this mixed array, you can do something like mixed array, and then in the brackets, in the square brackets, you can pass the index. So we have mixed array with the index 1, and if I save that and execute it, it gives me hi. And since this is a normal string, you can also save that to a string as well. So hi equals to mixed r and 1. Now if I do console log hi and save this, execute it, you will see it here hi, which is arrays and line number 14. So this is line number 14. So you can also print that on console screen, and you can also assign them to some other variables as well. When we are working with arrays, most of the times you want to loop through arrays. You want to check each value one by one. So in that case, we can also use the loops. For example, we want to loop through this array and execute whatever the index is in this array. So for example, we want to print 1 2 3 4, or maybe we want to go with the names and print hi hello world, or with any array. So for that, let's make a for loop, and the condition and the declaration is I equals to 0, because the first index of arrays is always 0, not 1. So this index is 0. And then the condition is that we want to loop unless we reach the end of the array. So we are going with this array. So the length of this array is that we can do something like this, arr dot length, and this will give us the last index of the array. And then I plus plus, and then in the body we can do like arr and I. So I will be first time 0 and then 1 2 3 4, and save that, execute it, and you can see it here 1 2 3 4. Now let's do the same thing with mixed array. So we just need to replace this this and these two places with mixed array. Save that, execute it, and you can see it here. We have we have 1 high, true, and 2 by and false. That is how you can print a specific index using the loop. Now the next thing is how you can change a specific value. So for example, if you want to change this 2 to, for example, 5, so the index of this 2 is 3. So to do that, you can have something like mixed array 3 equals to 5, or maybe this index has been changed. Save that, and now let's just print this whole array and execute it. Now you can see we have 1 high, 2, this index has been changed by and false. So that is how you can change an index, a specific index of an array. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is object. So what are objects in JavaScript? An object is a collection of properties. It consists of key value pairs, where the key is the name of the property and value is the value of that property. A value can be anything. It can be a string, it can be a boolean, integer, function, array, or even another object. Objects are basically there to help you to put all the multiple related variables into one single place. So let's say that we have something like a name that is John, and we have age of the John, which is 50. And for example, the list goes on and we keep adding multiple attributes of John. So in that case, we will have like, for example, 10 different variables just for the John. So instead of like having 10 different variables, we can just create one object with the name John or with the name person and have all those variables inside that object. And the way we can do that is that we can have this variable named person, and that will be an object. So for the objects, we have to use these curly brackets, and inside that we can have name, which is John, and his age, which is 50. So that is how you can create a simple object in JavaScript. Now you know how you can change the value of a variable that has already been declared. For example, if I want to change the name of John, change the value of the John, I can have something like this, which will change this to Smith. But in case of person, we can also do that as well. So if I want to change this value of the name, I can do that too by typing person.name equals to John. And this notation is actually called dot notation. There is one other notation that we can use to access these properties and their values, and the other notation is called bracket notation. And we can do that by using bracket person and then putting square brackets, and inside the quotes you can use single quotes or double quotes, write the name of the property, which in this case is name. So let's go with the age this time, and equals to 30. So now this person.name equals to John will change the name, equals to Smith will change the name of will change the value of the name to Smith, and person age equals to 30 will change the value of age to 30. Now if you want to console this object, you can just simply go with console log person and it will console you. Now if I save that and execute the code, you can see here I have this object where we have the name Smith and the age 30. So now let's talk about what is the difference between dot notation and bracket notation. So basically are some cases where you do not know that what property you are going to access. So for example, if you ask your user that what property he or she wants to access, so in that case you are not sure what property he or she will choose. So in that case, let's say that we have this user selection and this is the property that user wants to access. So in this case we have something like name, and this means that user wants to access the name. So we can just simply go with console log person, and then here we can add user selection and save that. Now this is only possible with the bracket notation. If you try to do that using the dot notation, it will not work. So if I copy user selection, paste it here, now this will actually treat it as there is a property with the name user selection in the person. So that is why it will always give you undefined. And let's see that by executing the code. Save that, and you can see it here. I have this objects 19, which is this, and then object 17, which is Smith, and objects 18, which is this kind of code, and it is giving me undefined. Now if I add something here, user selected text or prop, and execute the code, you can see it gives me user selected prop. So that is the main difference between dot notation and bracket notation. And I always go for the dot notation if you know that what property you are going to access. If you're not sure about that, go for the bracket notation, like in case of where you want the user to access the property. We can have objects inside the objects, which are called nested objects. So let's see that how we can have that. So let me first comment this section, and then here let me also comment this as well. I'll copy that and have something here. So you can have these, for example, if you want to have your social media profiles of the person, so you can make something like this, LinkedIn, and here you will have LinkedIn profile, and then same goes for the Twitter, and for the Facebook, Gmail, GitHub, etc., and so on. So that is how you can have some nested objects. And the way you want to access it, so for example, if you want to access this LinkedIn and console that, so for that you can just do console log person dot social dot LinkedIn. Save that, execute the code, and you can see here we have LinkedIn profile. And if you want to change that, you will do something like person dot social dot LinkedIn equals to new LinkedIn profile. Save that, execute the code, and you can see here I actually have to console log this person dot social dot LinkedIn. Save that, and here you can see new LinkedIn profile. So that is how you can access the nested objects in objects. The next thing that we are going to check is arrays and how you can handle arrays in the object. So for example, you have something like so for example, you have something like logged in dates, like which will keep the record of at what day the user logged in. So like logged days, and this will be an array which gives you the day, of the month. So for example, user logged in on the first day, and the third day of the month, and then on the 5th day, 6th day, 7th day. So now you can access this logged days just like you access the social or the LinkedIn, and this is actually now a normal array. And to access this, you can just do console log person dot log days. Let me comment this code, save that, clear the screen, and you can see I have 1, 3, 5, 7, 6, and 7. And if you want, you can also loop through it. For example, at I equals to 0, I is less than person dot log days dot length I plus plus and console log person.log days with the index of I. Save that and execute it, and you can see here 1 3 5 6 7. So that is how you can access arrays inside the objects. Functions. Functions are used to avoid repeating yourself. A function has a body where you add multiple lines of code, and then you can use that function name to execute those multiple lines of code instead of repeating yourself. This helps you to write clean and readable code. The basic syntax of function is something like this, where you have the keyword function followed by the name of the function with these brackets and the body. So here in this body you can have your code. So for example, console log hi there. Now this is a function and we can execute this as many times as we want. And the way to execute that is that we just need to have this, the name of the function followed by the brackets, and this will execute the function for us. So for example, so if I execute this now, you can see here we have hi there. And if I copy this and have it multiple times and save it and execute it, you can see here hi there we have 4 times hi there. Now this is one of the basic example of function. You can obviously have like multiple lines of code, like 100 lines of code, 1,000 lines of code, which will help you to avoid repeating yourself. So imagine that there are 2 places where you have to write 100 lines of code, and both of the code is exactly the same thing. So instead of writing those 100 lines of code multiple times, you can just copy those lines of code and make a function and just call that function over those places. And that will help you to reduce your lines of code and helps you to make your code more readable and clean. Now, there are some cases where, for example, you want to use a function, but there are like slight changes in those 2 places. So for example, you have a function which helps you to greet your user, and it actually calls their name with the hi there. So for example, hi there and then the name, like hi there John. So now this is a function, but this function is not much usable. You can use it just for the John. What if we have Smith, or what if we have someone else that joined? So in that case, this is not helpful. So what we can do for that is that we can have an argument in the function. So function actually can take some input which you can use in your function body. So for example, I want to make it reusable and I want to take an input. So in this case, I have this name, and instead of having just hi there John, I can make it a little bit more usable and have something like hi there plus name and an exclamation mark. So it will take the input and add that with hi there. So for example, I want to greet John, so I can have John, I can also have Smith, I can also have Eva, etc. And if I save this and execute it, you can see hi there John, hi there Smith, hi there Eva. So that is how you can take inputs and use that inside your function body. Now the inputs are not just limited to strings. You can have names, you can have strings, you can have integers, you can even have arrays, you can also have objects. So for example, let's go back to the object section and copy this object, have it here, and person. So now if I pass it here and remove this, so now this name is actually an object. Now this person is an object, and to access the name we can do person.name and have another line where it says you are age years old. Save that, and if I execute that, it says hi there John, you are 50 years old. So that is how you can make this function more usable. So even if you have some slight changes in your code, you can still use the function and pass some arguments here, and also you can have multiple arguments. You're not just limited to one. You can use as many as you want, but the good practice is you keep them as short as possible. So just 2 or 3. So for example, I can pass something like, for example, I do not have an object. I can just go with name, age, and in that case, I will just have name and age. And now if I execute the code, it will say, I actually have to let name equals to Smith, let age equals to 50, and here we need to update it with name and age. And now you can see here, hi there Smith, you are 50 years of old. And for example, if you want to have some default values, you can also do that as well, like unknown person. Now if I save this, and for example, I do not pass anything at all, let's also have this age equals to 0. Now if I execute the code, it says that hi there unknown person, you are 0 years old. So what does this mean is that if you pass any value to hello, that will take that input and print that using this argument. But if you do not pass any argument, in that case it will use this unknown person as a default value, and same goes for the age. It will take this 00 and use that as a default value. So that is how you can work with the functions. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see an extensive JavaScript course on this channel, please let me know in the comment section.